make this happen. And obviously critical, absolutely critical to that will be having the municipalities support this through their local regulations, through their local plans, through their mindset about development in their community and what it means to develop as a community as opposed to developing on a lot and not looking beyond that lot. We've seen some promising signs. Some of the communities that have recently completed updating their comprehensive plans or who are in the midst of doing so are aware of what we're working on and have tried to incorporate some of these things. We've seen some early drafts of plans. I don't know if we want to mention specific towns. I think I won't do it unless somebody insists. We saw an early draft and said, yeah, you got the right idea, but you didn't quite go far enough. And they amended the draft because they understood the concept but didn't realize, you know, with our input, they were able to refine it a little bit. So I think we need to build those partnerships. There needs to be a lot of training at the local level. Again, to talk about some of the things we've talked about tonight, how it all fits together. How land use regulations are not separate and different from their energy approaches or their concern about their tax base or concern about providing services. This all fits together. Again, I can talk for an hour on development focus areas, and I've tried not to tonight. But to really get some of them comfortable, and it's not, again, it's not just the municipalities, it's the private developers too. And it's partly related to the land use regulations. Why do we develop the way we do? Because it's the easiest way to do it. The regulations are set up for that. If you wanted to do some of these mixed-use developments, you could technically almost in a lot of places in the county, but boy, the hoops you have to jump through to do it. You have to get it, you have to amend the zoning ordinance to do this, and you got to get a variance for that, and you got to work out these special plans and everything. So we're making it hard to do the things we want to accomplish and easy to do the things we don't really want to see. We've got to at least flip that equation a little bit so it's easier to do what we want as a community and a little harder to do the things we don't want to see. Wow, I hope we change topics soon. Sorry.
Can you ask
What a whole
how many
staff.
people here serve on a town board or on a planning board?
I see one, two.
I mean,
I still let one leave.
That's part of it, is
One
needing
left.
more people serving and bringing these issues forward and advocating for.
Absolutely, in your community, find out what the status of your planning is if you don't know now. I'm going to try to kind of work across to get.
Yeah, volunteer for your planning board. Yeah.
Yes, right here. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm still on this topic of development and planning nodes. One of the housing issues that you haven't talked about tonight, I don't think the term was mentioned, is student housing. And I see that if Cornell does not accommodate all of its students on campus in some form of dormitory or apartment settings on campus, then there's spillover to the surrounding area. And so there's pressure, there's development pressure on neighborhoods adjacent to Cornell that used to be single family or maybe even had the potential for being apartments for people who are employed at Cornell. There's pressure to replace those with student housing. So talk about that issue in terms of your goals and objectives.
Well, I'll try to address that a little bit. The housing units we talked about were did not include any undergraduate student housing. It was really workforce and other demographics needs that driving that, not students. I would say the city's college town plan is, I think, trying to address that question by providing the opportunity for more student housing to be developed closer to campus. There's some projects happening right now near IC that are also developing more student housing close to campus. So I think there are efforts underway to do that. There are some major private developments in the city of Ithaca right now underway that will provide more student housing somewhat close to campus. And I do think that's
an example, though, of what I'm talking about. To me, that the history, we're talking about the East State Street, Noir, et cetera.
Yes.
I mean, the history of that going all the way back to the 80s, which I'm well aware of, put pressure on single-family neighborhood housing,
right,
where people who were employed at Cornell could, and they weren't all professors, by the way, people could walk to work. And that's what you're talking about. That's a goal that you've identified. But the very opposite of that was happening with the pressure to build more student housing and sort of replace the single-family housing neighborhood focus with student housing. And part of it is Cornell wasn't building enough dormitories.
Well, I'd say I think that's largely a city planning issue. I mean, it's a lot of it's absorbed within the city of Ithaca. We didn't get, in our county comprehensive plan, we're taking a big picture look. So we didn't spend, and have not spent much time on student housing issues, quite honestly. I do think, though, what you're talking about is conversion of housing units to student housing, not building of new housing for students. And if there was housing actually being built for students, which I think maybe Jennifer wants to address, that would relieve some of that pressure on the neighborhoods, hopefully. Yeah, Jennifer, you want to talk about that?
I just wanted to say kind of a related thing. I chair the city's planning committee, which is not a staff thing, it's a common council thing. But one of the aspects of the college town planning is trying to make that neighborhood more 365 days a year, more diverse in order to support that, as well as trying to protect some of the areas around while increasing the density. So I won't even go into the details of any of that, but it's on the table right now. It's a good time right at the end of that process, and it's really a difficult thing because you can't just focus on one area of that. You really have to focus on so many pieces of it, especially in an existing city fabric. So.
It's a great issue for the city's comprehensive plan to deal with.
Since housing is one of the main things you're working at, and housing traditionally follows jobs, I mean, usually a big employer, and then the housing would be built around.
I wish that was true, but that's not what's been happening.
Is there, no, now, but that traditionally was the way it happened.
Yes.
But is there any plans to bring big employers in to these nodes or places that you want to develop? Like, say, for instance, farming is a big part of Tompkins County. There's no really big food processing people in Tompkins County. Has there been any thought about encouraging big employers to come to town, or like people that can, employers that would build on what you're trying to do in terms of housing and increasing housing?
I would say, we're not, and this is not exactly the right term, but we're not a smokestack chasing community. We're not a community that's going out for that 1 in 1,000 shot to get somebody to locate here, that's going to ask for everything the community has to offer and then some to get them here. Our economic development is more based on what we can grow from the grassroots up. And that's why I think this organization is emblematic of that. Entrepreneurs, spin-offs from existing businesses and institutions in the community, idea-driven business, quality of life-driven business. That's the kind of economic development I think we focused on here. So we aren't out there looking for that so much. It would be nice though if somebody wants to develop, try to get them to locate in one of these places where they will be near the housing that may be coming in the future. So I agree with that. We do want to see that.
Ed, I want to take back on that a minute. The city chancellor spoke at TC3 last week and made that a very similar point that we're not really looking at a single large employer, but making, it's a perfect audience for this, making the 10-employee business a 20-employee business, making the 20-employee business a 50-employee business. I think we'll see considerably more in that direction than the single large employer.
And those are jobs that don't tend to just pick up and go overseas too. Yes, right,
The point that isn't being made is that right now there's a lot of people who work in this county that commute in from other places because they find it more affordable to drive their car 30 or 40 miles than to live in Tompkins County. If we can provide more affordable housing, we can bring cost of housing down as the cost of commuting goes up, we're going to have that growth, increase that you were just talking about how our growth is low. We might experience a lot of growth because we have jobs here. We just don't have the people who work in those jobs living here.
And I think there are opportunities for developers, for people that can meet those needs. There will be a market for that. I really do believe that. Yeah, we did it. There was an in-commuter survey that was done some years ago, both for Cornell employees and downtown employees, and that was one. We asked that some questions be added about housing at the time it was done, and there is, indications in there that people would give it another look if there was more available that met their needs here. Not everybody, because some people are tied to those other communities, but a significant portion of people would consider living here, and that wasn't even reflecting what might happen with energy prices. So,
Is the county doing anything to take some of the redefinitions of affordable housing that include transportation and try to promote those?
I wouldn't say we're doing anything. I know that's an active topic of conversation. The complete cost of living, including energy. That's the other part of it. If you energy efficiency, how do you make it more economical to build more energy efficient? Well, if you take the total cost of living in a housing unit, which includes the building itself, the energy costs, the transportation costs, it's a different equation. That's one I think you're right. We need to be focusing on. Scott?
What's the county's role or voice in the Emerson opportunity?
I'm sorry, we've run out of time. Sorry, I tried to say.
Our voice is low and quiet. Our role remains to be seen. I guess that's the best I can say about that. Josh?
I could talk about a lot of things, but I'm going to focus on something specific, and Rod touched on it. The parking requirements, and I'm most familiar with within the city, and I'm not sure about the rest of the county, but the parking requirements seem to undermine a lot of the really good ideas in the plan here. I've read the whole plan. If anybody hasn't read it, it's a very good read. But the parking requirements seem to undermine a lot of what you talk about in promoting growth where density already is, where the infrastructure already is. So what you end up getting is, and I think the gentleman there that was talking about the housing up near where he lived, you end up getting these, if you do get development, you get these structures, these large structures that have parking incorporated in the site, and they're the only entities that can develop. And you talk about entrepreneurs, and you talk about diversity. What I see with parking requirements in the Ithaca community is us going in a direction of LA, and I guess my question to you is, what's your thoughts about parking requirement in light of where we're going as a community?
We're not a stickler for meeting parking requirements when we review projects. I would say that that are on the books now. I agree, and I think we agree that there doesn't need to be as much on-site parking as long as the alternatives are good. If the location is good enough that walking is a no-brainer, then you maybe don't need so much parking. If the transit service is good, maybe you don't need so much parking. But if you don't have those things, then you're going to need it. And so that's the trade-off I think it's got to be made. Where you want density and you have transit service and you have employment nearby, you should be looking at whether you can modify your parking standards down. Bruce?
And from your Eagle perspective of over, come on, you have sort of a comprehensive view or overview of the county. Well, what is in my lifetime, I've been here all my life. The county's grown maybe 10,000 people, and there was a couple waves of immigration and expanding colleges. But what's your salient preoccupation in terms of what the county needs to do, what it needs to do? What do you think we need to do?
Do you mean growth-wise?
Well, not growth-wise, because we're not growing maybe 10,000 people every 50 years. And I don't know what's going to, I've heard all these theories that Cornell's going to send a medical school up here and this and that. And this stuff's been circulated like urban myth that suddenly we're going to get a big bulge in population, but that's not happening. But so the thing is, though, how do we perfect ourselves? So what would you go to bed thinking about, waking up thinking about that? Is that one thing besides food?